Hi, this is Gautam. For today's episode, we are going to look at this non-fiction work, The Nutmeg by Amitav Ghosh. Now, if you are interested in books written by Amitav Ghosh, do look at the description for the playlist. Now, this book is brilliant on several levels, and I would like to point out that this book also has a fundamental flaw which you can see in books related to environmental movements and environmentalism. We'll address this at the end of the review. So first, we look at the broader, very good aspects of the book. Now, though the author hasn't divided the books into part A, B, and C, you can broadly divide the themes which are discussed in the book into three segments. The first is regarding the colonization, the European colonization from the non-European perspective, and that is where this word nutmeg comes in. Nutmeg is a ground spice which is native to the Banda Islands, which is present in the Indonesian archipelago. So he starts with the history, like this, more or less starts as a case study. So how the Europeans, especially the Dutch East India Company, moved to Banda Islands, what measures are taken by them for the cultivation of the spice, which eventually leads to the genocide of the natives of the land. So based on this case study, he starts to discuss similar events. For example, in 1637 to 1639, what happened in the New England states, when the settlers from Britain started encountering the resistance of the Native Americans. So you find several case studies based on this. Then he starts with a broader idea of European colonization from the non-European perspective. And when he discusses about this non-European perspective, you generally get two characteristics. First is, if you look at the writings of European history, in most of those instances which is written by Europeans, colonization is always portrayed as the Europeans bringing in enlightenment to the lands of Americas, Asia, and Africa, including Australia. And the second important characteristic is that even though they went for genocide, it is not really recorded in the history which is written by the Europeans. The third was an interesting feature which the author is relating to the contemporary world. You have few chapters dedicated to that. The concept or the idea of terraformation. Now today, when it comes to space and exploration of planets, we associate terraformation with how we can modify Mars or how we can modify Venus based for human habitation. But technically what the author says is terraformation was done by the colonialists when they moved on to the lands in Asia, Australia, Africa, and Americas. Now, what he talks about terraformation is the fourth characteristic under the first subhead itself, is the idea that Europeans do not look at forests, or Europeans did not look at jungles and forests in a positive perspective. They always looked at jungles or the people or the tribes who lived in harmony with nature as brutes, as savages. And their idea of development always meant you convert these forest areas for settled agriculture. At the same time, you convert these lands for your own industrialization and urbanization. So that was the idea of European perspective. So this dichotomy of considering a forest as part of your life, or inhabiting forest as part of your own ecosystem service, and then looking at forest as something to be conquered. Now this is a problem in the European way which kind of accelerated colonization. What the author says is, even today, this colonial perspective is practiced by several governments which are there in the developing world. So, as you can see, like European colonization has been taken under four characteristics. Like first is the absence of history. Second is, European colonization as a perspective of enlightenment. Third again is the concept of terraformation. And the fourth concept being the same thing is pretty much done in contemporary times also. The second theme of the book is the European realization of sustainable development, which has happened in the last few decades. And the author also talks about the hurdles which prevent the developed world from moving towards sustainable development. Even though they are moving for renewable energy, it is a very slow and tedious process. We can see that. And the reasons, and this is where I want to stress the point, as in, The reasons which the author points out as hurdles for renewable energy, he points out reasons from geopolitics, for example, the American-Saudi Arabian relationship of petrodollar exchange, and about military and defense, because if you take a country's energy usage, a good chunk of the energy usage is for military and defense purposes. He takes United States as a very good example. So the second subhead or theme you can classify in the book falls into that. The third theme is regarding climatic vulnerabilities. Even though the climatic vulnerabilities are increasing because of the activities of the developed world and the super rich, the people who are more vulnerable to climate change live in developing nations and they are part of low income groups. Now, he discusses this aspect or this theme by taking several case studies again. For example, one, he talks about the plight of the Bangladeshis, who want to move away from the land as far as Italy. At the same time, he looks at the impact of COVID-19 in the United States, where there was disproportionately higher number of cases and higher number of casualties in the African Americans. So, he talks about this vulnerability theme, not just in terms of country perspective, but also in terms of income perspective. Now, if you're a regular reader of newspapers and journals, and if you're following current affairs properly, you would naturally know that, see, all these three major heads which you're talking about, it is nothing dramatic. It is something which is present in popular media. But that is where you get author Amitav Ghosh's writing repertoire in place. He has extensive references in literature, he's interlinking poetry, and this ability to draw parallels between the historical and contemporary on several subjects, starting from politics to economics to environment, is astounding. And that's what, you start reading these, different chapters, you start to appreciate, how good a person can interlink and connect all these aspects and presents a comprehensive perspective. But as I told you again, books on environmentalism have these two fundamental problems when the author writes it. I do not know whether they realize when they write it. Now, let me talk about the first fundamental aspect. It is about renewable energy itself. Now, when renewable energy or sustainable energy is is placed in media, or even you take this book for example, it is taken for granted that renewable energy itself does not have any problems. But first of all, renewable energy is not consistent. I mean, a basic student of an electrical energy or basic student of physics would technically know that if you take solar energy or wind power or geothermal, or you can talk about wave energy, all of them are highly spatio-temporal. You take solar, you move away from the tropical region, there is not much amount of sunlight to synthesize for 24 hours a day. Same thing is applicable to your wind energy also. There are only certain locations on earth or certain seasons in which your wind velocity is consistently higher that you can generate. If you go for offshore wind power again, the cost of technology is very high that not all the countries will be able to afford it. So first thing is the spatio-temporal aspect, and the second one, as I told you, is about the technology aspect and the cost aspect. Third thing, renewable energy is not always environment friendly. For example, let's say that you want to improve the number of electric vehicles which is there in your country simply because you feel that you want to reduce your fossil fuel consumption. But think deeply. If you want to go for electric vehicles, again, you need two important metals. One is cobalt and one is lithium. Where is lithium? Lithium is predominantly distributed, the maximum amount of reserves is in countries like Argentina, Bolivia and Chile. And if you go for lithium extraction, again, you'll have to harm environment because electric vehicles, you need lithium again for batteries. Let's take most of the smart devices which we use. You need cobalt. And 50% of cobalt comes from one single country, Democratic Republic of Congo. And Congo is an equatorial country which is large amount of tropical rainforest. And again, you'll have to go in for mining, which is deforestation. And if there is going to be a good amount of human population for consumption, you will have to go for extensive agriculture. Even though the arguments that monoculture is creating a lot of problems, more water extraction, all that is accepted, but we got here because we were able to sustain a large human population because those agricultural practices, at least to an extent, was successful. If that wasn't, we wouldn't have been here. So, if the author could have, added few more chapters, on the alternate perspective that if you take renewable energy, there are these concrete challenges rather than simply brushing them away. Renewables we can move. If you move to renewables, all the problems will get solved. That is, not a comprehensive discussion. So I think that is where the book kind of falls short on its purpose, because pointing out problems alone doesn't provide immediate solutions. And if the author could have included that perspective also, I'm pretty sure this would stand alone from several books which are written in this theme of environmentalism and neoliberal or against neoliberalism, against neo-colonial exploitation and all that. So that's one foot short, but still, that is no excuse for not reading this book or not buying this book. Even if you're familiar with the broad three themes which I told you, those are the broad three themes which are under discussion in this text, I will still recommend that you buy this, because what Amitav Ghosh has done is a certain level of linkages and drawing parallels which not many will be able to achieve. So that's it for today's review. I'll remind again, if you're interested in books written by Amitav Ghosh, do look at the description for the playlist. Bye for now.